Um, so as I said, it took me 2 years. I hired a performance coach, Rowena Silvera, and she had me list everything I was involved in, and it was 7 pages, single space. Oh, legal size paper, not letter. And for many of you who are like, moms, you have a long list too. And I'm gonna tell you why, because it's not that you're just a mom. Particularly when your children are small, you are also carpool. You are the nutritionist. You are the doctor. You are the bedtime and cleanup general, right? You are the entertainment specialist. You have all these roles and responsibilities.
I wish I knew how much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFour. Welcome to Taught, the podcast. I am pleased to have today's guest, Lynita Mitchell-Blackwell, Esquire, joining us to chat about burnout today. Lynita and I have a common friend who introduced us, and as soon as I met her, I knew that this was someone who understood burnout and took it seriously. Lynita is a public speaker, coach, and author, as well as an attorney and a CPA. Like many of us who find ourselves in burnout, she is a bit of an overachiever. It led her into a health crisis. And finally, the many hats and roles that she was taking on were affecting her health. Today, Lynita is going to share her personal story and how she was able to recover her health and take back her life better in a manageable and fulfilling way. Lynita, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me. That was a beautiful introduction, and it summed up how we connected as soul sisters over burnout and how we have had to take some drastic steps to ensure that we don't go back down that path.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about your story is it does match mine in how sneakily our bodies absorb stress and react to it. And I don't want to make this a women's issue, but I do think as women, we have a tendency to say, oh, it's just my period. Or for me, for years, it was, I'm in menopause. I was in menopause for 15 years. It was perimenopause. That's what's causing this. It was really hard for me to connect those dots. So I'm excited that you're going to help us do that today.
Well, thank you. It will be my pleasure. We'll work through it together. How about that?
Okay, that sounds good. So tell me a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So, as you've already mentioned, my various roles professionally, attorney, CPA, speaker, 6-time best-selling author, personally, wife, mom, daughter, and so part of the sandwich generation. And I will also just add human, having a spiritual experience and doing the best she can with what she knows now. Because I tell you, Melissa, if I had the opportunity to talk to my younger self, I would tell her to stop focusing so much on being perfect and focus instead on being excellent. And the difference between the two is that perfection is living up to someone else's standards, someone else who may have loved, cared about, and wanted the best things for her, for me as a young person. Still, they were someone else's hopes, dreams, and aspirations for me. And by definition, when you are living up to someone else's standards, then you are trying to be perfect. And that is actually what led to the burnout, the sleepless nights, the saying yes to projects that were way outside of my wheelhouse, to always feeling that I had to be everything, everywhere, all at once to everyone, and then not really being able to be present and the health issues that came from that. It started off with the physical. When you were talking about menopause, I so relate to that because my hair started breaking off, and all I did was start wearing wigs, and my nails started splitting. I knew every nail tech in town who was excellent. And my skin started to deteriorate, and all I did was learn how to do my makeup like these amazing Instagram girls, right? And it really was not until I passed out from exhaustion, and my daughter found me like that. And at the time, she was only 6. And like many people, I knew something needed to change, but I didn't know what. And so that actually was the kickoff to my journey, figuring out how to change, what needed to change, and how to stay in that rhythm, that path.
Because it's a skill. I mean, once you get onto that road of recovery, you realize that if you don't continue to do the things that you need to do in recovery, you end up back in the same place.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. And that's what happened because when my daughter found me like that, it was horrifying because thankfully she was small enough that she didn't realize I wasn't getting up because I couldn't. She just thought I was tired. And so she got her Disney princess's blanket off of her bed and she put it on me. And she took one of her little pillows and put it under my head and kissed me on the forehead and said, "Good night, mama." And the only thing that I could say was "good night, baby." I could not put my child to bed. And, as a mom, that's already devastating. But, we have our routines. And I used to read her stories. My husband and I, we would do that together. And then we would tuck her in. And so to not have even had the strength to do that, that really hurt me. But I didn't know what else to do other than, well, I just need to take a break. And so I took a long weekend. And when I felt better, all I did was go back to what I was doing before. Um, and it was not until I developed stage 4 endometriosis, which is the uncontrolled growth of uterine cells outside of the uterus, and fibroids the size of grapefruits, that I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do something different because when the doctors took one look, literally, Melissa, they opened me up to do the surgery and they just had to close me back up. And they waited until I, woke up from the anesthesia and they gave me the news. They were like, just like, we couldn't do the surgery because it was much worse than we thought. It was worse than anything we've seen before. The endometriosis had made its way up to my lungs and had created a cement-like structure of my uterus, my vagina, and my colon. And so I had to go on a journey. It was both physical, from the medications to burn as much off as possible, as well as the mental, emotional, and spiritual to find someone who could help me to stop with this trading my self-esteem for these accolades and achievements, because that's really what was happening. If I didn't hear, "Lynita, you're amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to have you on my team," then I would just do more so that I would get that. And just like any other addiction, it takes more and more for you to get the same result or the same feeling, that same high. And I tell people, Melissa, I don't necessarily regret my journey because it brought me here today to be able to share this and be transparent and help more people. But if I did have the opportunity to go back and just walk my younger self through, I wouldn't necessarily say don't do the things. I would just say those things cannot replace self-love, self-care, and your self-esteem. And
That's
that's what it would be.
that is so true.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I think females tend to push ourselves a little bit harder and put ourselves kind of at the end of the priority list pretty easily. And we live in a culture that says we're doing a good job when we do that.
Yes.
So, and it does. I also am a perfectionist, and so I also enjoy those pats on the back. And when I'm not getting them in the past, I don't have this going on as much, but definitely when I was still in my career as a teacher, I felt like if I wasn't getting those, then I must not be doing something correctly. So
Right.
I needed to do more.
Right. And you really hit on something about how society has led us down this role of if we take care of everyone else, then eventually we will get what we need. And the what we need, someone else has determined what that is, and that is recognition and reward. But what we really need is love. And we have to start with ourselves. And the idea of self prioritization and empowerment, it sounds so foreign. As a matter of fact, for many people, it sounds selfish, but we've all heard the analogy that you can't pour from an empty cup. Well, that's what we're asking people to do. And as you said, specifically women to do, is if I take care of my life partner, if I take care of my children, if I do well at work, if I serve in my community and my faith-based organization, that everybody telling me what a wonderful job I'm doing and lifting me on this pedestal as the epitome of womanhood, then that will be enough. And it's not, because we've not taken the time to appreciate who we are, what we are, and how we serve, as Paul Selig says so eloquently. We have to learn to appreciate us without all the stuff.
Yes.
And that is a journey. It takes time to do that. For me, it took about 2 years. I now work with people, so that doesn't take that long. But it really depends on how far down the rabbit hole you are. And that's the truth.
I think you're right. And I think I'm just thinking as you're talking about some of my experiences as an educator, and I grew up in the Midwest. I also think sometimes where you come from makes a little bit of a difference in your association with what you should do and how that should look. But,
Agreed.
teaching is a female dominated profession. Um, we won't go down the many rabbit holes associated with that. But as you're saying this, one of the things I feel like there are so many structures that are in place that kind of create a culture of burnout.
Mm.
And one of the things that came to my mind when you were saying, all of these things that you feel you have to serve, for teachers, we get an evaluation,
Mhm.
usually yearly, some sort. And there's a rubric that goes along with it. So you're going to have to meet these metrics and you're going to be judged accordingly.
Yes, yes,
But
that's right.
you want to get all the way over here to whatever it is, exemplary, professional, queen of teaching. That's where
Mhm.
you're trying to get to. And I remember sitting in an evaluation and having an administrator say to me, you keep landing in the slot right before queen teacher. And
Mhm.
here's what you
Before a
need.
queen teacher, you
Yeah,
said.
I could not get over it. They didn't call it queen teacher. I'm calling
Right,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like I couldn't move over and it just drove me crazy. And he said, well, there's this one little he said, well, there's this one little area here where it says that you need to be bridging your classroom with the community. And that's the piece that's
Mm.
missing here. And I said, I don't even know how I'm supposed to do this. And he said, well, you could put together some community initiatives for having community members come into, do these things in education, or you're taking your kids out and you're serving the community. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I'm working 60 to 70 hours a week right now. I have a class of 35 sixth graders packed like sardines into a classroom.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be, where does this time, where does this come from? And feeling that devaluation that comes from, I'm never going to be queen teacher.
Wow.
I'm never going to get there. And I just think that is when you were saying we've got to get our heads right and figure out what is going to bring us peace and joy and love and hope and harmony and all of those things that we crave. That evaluation wasn't part of it. That evaluation just made me feel worse.
And Melissa, we don't talk about this, but this is the truth. Those evaluations are not supposed to make you feel good. They're supposed to keep you hungry and keep you on the hamster wheel craving more. Because the moment that we have a mass awakening that it was never going to work, this whole rush for cars, cash, clothes was never going to satisfy what you really wanted, which was peace, joy, and fulfillment. We would have people quitting en masse. They would change their entire way of living, thinking, and being. And honestly, our society is just not set up for that. Our society is set up for people to go on these jobs, work them for an extended period of time, building up someone else's hopes and dreams, and then to go off. Now, if that going off includes being retired or finally building your own empire, but during your working years, the system is set up for you to stay hungry. And that's just the truth of it.
Yep. We've got some other systems that are feeding into that one too, like buying a
Yeah.
house for a 30-year mortgage that you have to.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to need to have our own podcast. It's going to be the Lynita and Melissa show.
I'm
So,
down. Just let me know when you're ready, sister. Yeah.
and I think maybe we should call it DEI, by the way, because I think that speaking of the housing system and the education, okay, but I'm going to stop there. I will cut this out. See,
No,
that's what I'm
please
telling you.
don't. That was good. I like. Okay. Well, it's your show.
Okay.
You do it too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get us back on track. And actually, you've already alluded to this, but I want to hear. I want to hear your words around it, because I think you have a really interesting perspective on what is fueling burnout, not just for teachers, but for everyone. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. It is this pursuit of this perfect life instead of the excellent one. So I started off earlier talking about what perfect is, living up to someone else's expectations. So now let's shift and talk about the excellent life. See, this is when you take control of your narrative. When you realize that the people in your life, they taught you the best that they could with what they knew. We thank them, and then we realize that we've got to make a different choice, and we create our own standards. And that is one that is based on grace, with an understanding that what my greatness looks like today is going to look different from 10 years from now. And I really hope it is very different from what it was 10 years ago. It understands that we go through life, we go through changes. Our mission, vision, value, the overarching is the same, but how we're going to accomplish those things, they will need to shift. If you're a wife and a mom, you have other people to take into consideration. So you may not have the freedoms that a person who does not have those obligations has. If you have Parents who are relying on you because they are older, you don't have the same freedom as a person who does not have that obligation. So you have to take those things into consideration when we're talking about setting goals and being strategic about accomplishing our life purpose and mission. And I'm saying this because during my time of going through the wilderness, I wasn't taking any of that into consideration. I remember my daughter was 4 years old. My mother had brain surgery. My husband was pastoring a church that was at that time 3 hours from our home each way. And yet I was still managing my law firm, managing my accounting firm. I was president of two nonprofit organizations at the time. Plus, I had the roles of being wife, mom, and caretaker for my mother. And I was not building, oh, I'm sorry. And I was training to run a marathon. So, all these things. But did you hear me say anything about taking something off my plate? No, I was just gathering stuff. Oh, look at me juggle. And it was such a disservice to not just myself, but to anybody who was watching me. Because the thing about us, Melissa, and people like us is we make it look really easy. And people
Yeah.
are just like, how does she do it? I don't understand what's wrong with me. Not why is she doing that? That is crazy and something needs to change. And that is an incredible disservice. And so when we fall apart, instead of being honest and upfront about it, we go and hide. And we
Yeah.
call it vacation. But really, what it is we've collapsed. We're in the hospital. We are trying to get ourselves together because we're a hot mess right now. And I will tell you, if you want to avoid all of that, it's just one thing. And it has served me in these years since I came to this. Whenever something rolls onto your plate, something else has to roll off.
Yep.
That's the rule. Period, point blank. So you look at everything that's on your plate. There should not be anything on the plate that is not consistent with your life purpose. Not that's not positive, because at this point in our lives, we know how to stay away from mess, right? I'm talking about things that are inconsistent or do not add value to where we're going. That's got to go. And then when opportunities come, because I'm telling you, you're going to be a magnet for abundance, prosperity, and all the good things. They're always going to be coming to you. You can't say yes to everything.
Yep.
Whatever you say yes to, something else has to go. And unless and until you're willing to release something, you can't bring it on. Because otherwise, you're going to go right back into that old life.
Yep. So, when I got to Portugal, I thought, okay, so here's the solution. You just move countries. I don't know what anybody's saying. They're speaking Portuguese. I'm speaking English, but I'm going to have this time to myself. And it did not take me, I think it took me 6 months. And I edited my book. I decided to make it an audio book. I was working almost as much as when I was a teacher. And I found the work. And then my husband was the one that said to me, wow, I thought you were going to be less stressed. And I said, oh, I am less stressed. You can't tell that I'm less stressed. And you saying this made me think of another thing. I'm a complainer. I own it. I like to complain, but not really do anything about it. And so I was complaining to a friend of mine when I was still teaching. I said, I don't understand. Everybody else, they come to me. They want me to take over this committee or they want me to do this. And I don't understand. And she said, Melissa, you come across as very capable. You never come across as someone who is like, what you're saying, my plate is full.
Yeah.
Please find someone else. And I thought, ooh, that's a little dose of truth that I needed. That when you are presenting capable, then people think they can give you more, that you can handle it.
Yes. Yes. And that is living up to someone else's standards as well. This whole feeling of I can't say no. For those listening, you
Yes.
must say no. for your own health and well-being, for the people who are counting on you and looking up to you. You have to say no.
You do. And you took us through your burnout story of a
Yeah.
very good idea of how you got there. So one of the things that you had mentioned in your questionnaire is that when you were there, the strain it took on the personal relationships in your
Yes.
life. Can you speak
Yes.
a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, in every area, there was strain. So, I was taking on all these roles and responsibilities, and anybody who has served in leadership knows that there is a financial obligation to that as well. So, it was a strain on our homes, our household finances that my husband, because he's a wonderful man, was very supportive of, even when it was just impossible, he still made a way, right? It was a strain on my relationship with my parents because they really needed me to be more engaged than what I was. And I was resentful because I'm just like, I'm finally here where I want to be. And I'm being pulled in 1,000 directions. But, you know, once your parents hit a certain age, you know, or you should have some idea of what is about to come. So there needs to be some planning for them and that role. So there was strain there. There was strain with my siblings because my sister came home from the Navy and with the idea that she would live in Atlanta and be able to go to school here. And this was about the time that my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He has recovered. He's doing great now. But,
Yeah.
you know, instead of being able to be here with the family, she had to go home to Miami to be with him. And so, you know, there was a strain in our relationship there because that was not the plan, not the plan at
Mhm.
all. But I was not in a position or mentally or practically to be more of a help with him. There was a strain with my own child because I was gone so much. She was constantly with other people, people of trust in our circle, family and friends only. But still, she was my baby, or worse,
Yeah.
most of the time I was dragging her along with me to many other places. And while she got to see mama in action, we didn't have a whole lot of time that I look back. We should have spent more time at the park and just sitting at the soda stream and laughing and talking. And that's something that I wish that I had, but it is something I am grateful to know because now I am very, very zealous in guarding our time together, especially since now she'll be going off to college in less than 6 months. And that is
Aw,
just like, oh my gosh.
congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the for anybody listening too, I think if you're a working mom, you can relate to this. Those it usually we're at the end of a phase. Right
Yeah.
now, my daughter, before you realize, right? And right now my daughter is 11, getting ready to turn 12. And over the holidays, this Christmas, I really noticed that just the things that she used to enjoy doing with her dad and I, she'd prefer to spend with her friends now. She
Yeah.
doesn't care about going and seeing the Christmas lights as much as she does seeing her friends. And so you're usually at the end of these moments when you're like, wow, okay, I didn't realize that this was going to go away. And then that little piece is gone. But what I was going to say for you working moms out there listening, it's okay. We've all been there. But you do have exactly what Lynita is saying. You have this moment to start. Even if now I have an 11, almost 12-year-old, but I also have a 29-year-old and a 34-year-old. And even if you have that 29-year-old or that 34-year-old, there are still moments to be had. There are still moments to be had. So you can have those.
Well said. Well said.
It's we girl moms. I hear a lot about boy moms. Actually, I don't even know why people do that. Just moms in general. Those kids mean everything to us. So,
Yeah.
so
Yes,
we
they do.
have we have gotten you, we know how you got to burnout. The exciting part is that you were not doing well physically
Mhm.
and you realized something had to change. So can
Yes.
you start your story there, because it's a pretty amazing recovery story and you've put together some pretty amazing things to help others of us.
Thank you. Um, so as I said, it took me 2 years. I hired a performance coach, Rowena Silvera Beck, and she had me list everything I was involved in, and it was 7 pages, single space. Oh, legal size paper, not letter. And for many of you who are like, moms, you have a long list too. And I'm gonna tell you why, because it's not that you're just a mom. Particularly when your children are small, you are also carpool. You are the nutritionist. You are the doctor. You are the bedtime and cleanup general, right? You are the entertainment specialist. You have all these roles and responsibilities. And that's just as your mom. If you have a life partner, you have a list. You have a business, you surely have a list. If you have more than one business, you have a list. You're serving in various roles and responsibilities in your community organizations as well as your faith based organizations. You have pages too. And so, what we did is we took it step by step and we whittled that list down from 7 pages to two.
Wow.
And we committed to that list would not get any longer than that. And so whenever I see myself kind of veering off, I come back to center because I realize that that is what is going to get me back in trouble. And for many of you, I suspect that you can relate to this as well. It's not that that life was so bad. It was actually really cool and it got you a lot of the stuff that you wanted, right? But it also got you into the place that you were in where there was strain and there was stress and anxiety and pain and hurt and sometimes even depression. And so that's what we're staying away from. And so I developed a process, a rubric in my latest book, Live Life on Fire, The Ultimate Guide to a Successful Life Full of Peace, Joy, and Fulfillment, that will allow you to continue to enjoy what you worked for, to make space for more to come, but for you to live in a way that says, I appreciate these things, but they don't define me. And so the first is to really embrace silence as your partner and friend. In our society, we are not taught to do that. We are taught to always have something going, to be ready with a prepared response, to always be ready to be on a stage like that, to be thinking about what is next in our day. And so it is hard for us to quiet the mind and just be. But we have to learn to do that, to embrace our own company and to be grateful for where we are right now, which leads into the second, which is to learn how to do that, which is by breathing, and the third, meditating. I do them together because sometimes you have to start by just learning how to take deep breaths, not those shallow breaths that stay up here in the lungs in the chest area, but the ones that get down into the womb area, because breathing clears out your body and it helps settle your mind. And one thing that I learned to do was to also balance the right and left brain, the hemispheres of the brain. And that's you just take your thumb and place it on your right nostril and you breathe in. And then you take these two fingers, your middle finger and your ring finger, and put them on your left nostril and just keep alternating breathing. And then eventually things will settle down. And now you're in a place where you can meditate. And meditating is just being quiet. I like to say, after Sri Ravi Shankar, he used to say that praying is talking to God and meditating is listening. And my grandmother used to say, you have 2 ears and one mouth, so you should be doing twice as much listening as you do talking. So you put your prayers and your petitions out, and now it's time to sit quiet and listen to what Spirit has to say for you, or the God of your understanding. And just be silent, to breathe, and to just listen. And sometimes you won't hear anything at all. But you know what? That's love too, just being able to sit into that. Once we're able to do those things, we can now move into flow. And flow allows us now to take our gifts, our skills, our talent, our expertise, and work in excellence with them. So now we are doing the job that we love or a job that we just kind of like, but doing it very well. We are learning how to deal with people just as they are. And even when they are behaving very badly, we're able to see past the pettiness and to see the love in that person's heart and speak directly to that so that our words are not harsh or not as harsh as they could be because, it's a growing process. And to be able to mentor and coach other people and to be a shining light wherever we go. We can be the whisper or the roar in the room, as Jill Flowers would say. These things allow us to go into life with a joy that is transformational. It allows our voices to be heard even when we are not speaking loudly. It allows our presence to be strong even when we're just sitting in the back of the room. And allows people to remember our names in rooms that we don't even know exist. I can say these things, Melissa, because they have all happened to me. I did not lose a thing by releasing that old way of thinking, that perfectionist thinking that led me to burnout. What I have gained is peace. I have gained forgiveness and grace for myself and others. And I have gained an appreciation for my life and my relationships that I just did not have before. And it's not to say I did not love those things, but now the amount of gratitude and thanksgiving that I have for them, I don't even know if there are words that can describe them. It just
It's a
feels good.
whole different experience, isn't it? I mean, you're
It really is.
experiencing life differently now.
Yes. Yes, I
So
am.
we live in Portugal and we live in a medium-sized city. It's not a huge city, but we live kind of by a busy road and I can hear the traffic most of the time. It's traffic most of the time. But we walk a lot of places and every once in a while we'll turn down a road and we'll be walking and I will notice all of a sudden that everything is silent.
I love
And
it.
here we are in the middle of the city, but all of a sudden we're in silence. And you can't hear any cars and you don't hear any of the city noises. And I see that street differently in that
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
And so what you are saying is resonating with me on a soul level.
Mm,
I can envision for myself what you're talking about.
yeah.
So you did this, you built everything back up. And one of the things that you mentioned is that you went to a coach. And I have to say, I feel like part of my perfectionistic behavior is also, I still have a lot of, I got this. I will
Ah,
figure it out.
yeah.
I will research. Google, I like to say I've gotten many doctorates from Google. I know how to medicate myself in many areas, I think. But there is something so profound about finding someone who is doing what you want and sitting down and getting advice from them. And there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of coaching services. And I really feel like this is a good thing, but you also have to be careful with it
Agreed.
because you need, just like a therapist, right? Not every therapist is going to be a good match.
That's right.
Not every life coach or whatever kind of coach you're seeing is going to be a good match for you either. But you were able to find somebody that was that match for you. I
Yeah.
just spoke with somebody else who found someone that was a match for them for time management. And they were saying, "Oh my gosh, this changed my life. I went to this person and I said, I like how you live your life. Tell me how you're doing it." And the person coached them through that. So as a result, you found a coach that helped you kind of get where you wanted to be. And now you have created your program. So you told us about your book. What other services are you offering?
I actually also have a retreat that I do twice a year called the Prioritize and Empower You Retreat. It's in April and October. So the April retreat is sold out. So we're now accepting people for our wait list for October. And it is 4 days, 3 nights of rest, breathing, stretching, and 4 courses where we do together, where we walk through how you got here, why you don't like being here, and what you're willing to do to change. And then we go through the tools and techniques so that you can go home and implement those things into your life. And then post retreat is a 12-week coaching program where we meet once a week via Zoom to reinforce what you learned during the retreat, but also to give you some additional resources so that when it's all said and done, you'll do the things that resonated well with you to keep you on this life of excellence rather than perfection and burnout.
Wow. As you're going through that, I would almost think that those sessions after might be more important than the actual retreat. Not that the retreat isn't important, but I'm just thinking about myself and burnout. Something like this would have been very beneficial for me, but for me to stop that many days and tune in to self-care and strategies around that, it would have been a lot of resetting. And
Yes,
then needing that community after the fact
yes,
to make sure that I didn't pile more on the plate without taking stuff off.
that's right.
I guess it probably adds some accountability as well, as I say that.
Oh, and that's the whole point.
So, what advice do you have for people who haven't found their way out of burnout?
So the first thing that I would say is to be patient with yourself, because this is not a bag that you're going to find your way out of. This is a maze, and you have to find a wall, and you have to find someone who is going to help you through this, someone who's been there before. That's why I hired someone to help me. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to embrace the help, and you have to be willing to do what the person tells you to do, even when it sounds totally counter to everything that you have ever done. And the reason it sounds counter is because it is, and it's not comfortable because it is different from what you know. We are comfortable in what we know, even when it causes us pain. And so I need you to embrace, which is the third thing, releasing the pain, releasing that which you know, but you know is not going to get you what you want next. And then you have to tag people in. And this is hard, I know. You have to tell the people in your warm circle what you're working to do so they can hold you accountable. And you have to give them the permission to say something to you, and you not shut the door on them and ice them out because you don't like what they're saying. So those are hard things, I know, but you can do them. And you just have to keep continually doing that and stepping through it. Even after all of these years, I still get checked by people in my warm circle. And at the moment, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But it is for me, and they're doing it in love. And so I embrace it.
I love that. All of Lynita's information and her books and her website will be in today's show notes. I highly encourage everyone to check out her work. I think it can be transformational. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Lynita, before we say goodbye today?
Thank you so much for having me on your show. And remember, everyone, the goal is to live an excellent life, not a perfect one.
Love it. Thank you for being here.
I wish I knew.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez. If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small, independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, taught.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaru said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Taught, the podcast.
I wish I knew.
I have an important reminder/disclaimer to share. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Content provided on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. We encourage you to do your own research and consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions based on the information discussed in this or any other episode. Additionally, any opinions or statements made during the podcast are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you for tuning in.